You finally did the responsible thing. You opened the calculator, typed in everything you owe, and waited for a number that would make you feel a little better. $48,000. Minimum payment, $450 a month. Payoff date, 10 years out. 10 years. You looked at that little timeline sloping down so gently it barely seems to move, and something in your chest dropped. A decade of payments just to climb back to zero. And what that screen will never show you is that for most people carrying a balance like this, 10 years is the hopeful version. The real number is usually worse. Today I am going to show you exactly why, and the one rule that flips the whole thing in your favor. Let me start with the part you already feel, but almost never hear said out loud. The slowness is not your imagination, and it is not a character flaw. You are not bad with money because the bar will not move. The whole structure was built to move slowly, and once you can see how it was built, you can take it apart piece by piece. Look first at the ground you are standing on, because you are not standing on it alone. Americans now carry about $1.3 trillion in credit card debt, the highest balance the New York Fed has ever recorded since it started tracking back in the late 1990s. Total household debt has climbed to $18.8 trillion. Almost half of all cardholders are carrying a balance from 1 month to the next right now, and according to Bankrate. Nearly a quarter of people with card debt do not believe they will ever pay it off. Not that it will be difficult, that it is flatly impossible. So if the timeline on your screen makes you feel cornered, you are in the company of tens of millions of people, and that cornered feeling has a precise, mechanical cause that we are about to pull apart. The debt itself rarely sits in one tidy pile. Either, alongside the cards, Americans owe roughly $1.67 trillion on auto loans, where the average new car payment has crept up to $767 a month, and nearly 1 in 5 new car borrowers is now committed to more than $1,000 every single month. Student debt sits near $1.66 trillion, and delinquencies, the share of people falling behind, have been quietly rising, with close to 5% of all household debt now past due. That is the landscape. Rising balances, high rates, and a growing number of people slipping. The point is not to scare you. The point is to show you that the slow grind you feel is the default outcome of the whole machine, and defaults can be overridden. Think about the ritual the slowness creates, because the emotional toll is real and it matters. Payday arrives. You move money to the card the way you are supposed to. You watch the balance tick down by a sliver. Then the interest posts, the balance creeps back up, and within a week or two, you are staring at almost the same number you started with. Repeat that 30 or 40 times in a row, and a quiet belief settles into your chest. The belief that effort simply does not work for you, that other people must know some secret you were never handed. Then you scroll your phone and watch a friend post a vacation, a coworker mention a new car, a cousin closing on a house, and the gap between your reality and their highlight reel makes the whole thing feel even more hopeless. Set that comparison down right now. You have no idea how much of what you are seeing is itself financed, propped up on the very same shrinking minimums dragging you under. The only scoreboard that matters is the distance between your current self and your own freedom, and that distance is about to get a lot shorter. So how does a $450 payment turn into a 10-year sentence or something far longer? The answer hides inside one number that almost nobody stops to examine: your interest rate. The average credit card in 2026 charges right around 21%, according to the Federal Reserve, which is near the highest level ever recorded. Sit with what 21% does to a large balance. $48,000 at that rate generates roughly $840 of interest in a single month. Now set that beside the $450 payment on the screen. The interest alone is almost double what you are paying. In a situation like that, the balance does not shrink. It grows while you faithfully send money every month. The 10 years printed on the screen quietly assumes a gentler rate than most people actually carry, and it assumes you never miss a payment, never add a dollar of new spending, and never hit a single rough patch. Strip those assumptions away, and a decade stretches toward 2, or to a horizon that never arrives at all. This next piece is the one that explains everything, so do not skim it. The minimum payment is not a fixed amount. On most credit cards, your minimum is calculated as a small slice of whatever you currently owe, plus that month's interest, which means as your balance falls, your required payment falls right along with it. It feels generous. It is the trap. Every time you knock the balance down, the lender quietly lowers the bar, so a larger share of each smaller payment goes to interest and a smaller share goes to the thing you actually owe. You are running on a track that keeps lengthening underneath your feet. You run harder, the finish line slides further away, and you cannot understand why the effort never seems to pay off. That is the precise feeling of treading water in deep debt, and it is engineered, not accidental. Watch what that shrinking minimum does to an ordinary balance. The average American carries about $6,700 on their cards right now, according to TransUnion, $6,715 to be exact. Put that on a typical card at 21% and pay only the shrinking minimum every month, the way the statement gently invites you to. You would not be free for almost 19 years. 19 years on a balance most people assume they could clear in 2 or 3. And across those 19 years, you would hand the bank more than $10,000 in interest, paying back over $17,000 total on a debt that began under $7,000. You would more than double the original number, and it would take you nearly 2 decades to do it. That is not a glitch. That is the product performing exactly as designed. Let me make the mechanics concrete, because seeing where a single payment actually goes is what makes this click. Say you owe $10,000 on a card at 21%, and your statement asks for a minimum of about $250. In that first month, roughly $175 of your $250 is pure interest, vanishing into the lender's pocket. Only about $75 touches the thing you actually owe. So you sent $250 and your balance fell by $75. The next month, the lender recalculates your minimum on the slightly smaller balance, so it drops a few dollars, and the share eaten by interest stays brutal. Most of what leaves your account is rent on money you borrowed, not repayment of the money itself. That is the quiet arithmetic behind the feeling that you are paying and getting nowhere. You are not imagining it. For years, the majority of every minimum payment you make is feeding interest, and only a thin sliver is buying your freedom. Now look closely at how a bank designs the whole thing. A customer who pays slowly is not a problem for the lender. That customer is the entire business model. The longer you carry the balance, the more interest you generate, and the minimum payment is the softest possible leash, low enough to feel survivable, high enough to keep the meter spinning for years. You would think someone would have made that obvious right on the statement. Nobody did. The little box labeled minimum payment due is the single most expensive number in your financial life, and it is printed to look like the safe, responsible choice. So here is the rule that breaks it, and the quiet beauty of it is how plain it sounds. Decide what you can genuinely afford to pay each month, lock that exact number in, and never let it drop, no matter how far your balance falls. That is the whole foundation. You refuse the lender's offer to keep lowering the bar. Your payment stops being a percentage that melts away as you pay, and becomes a fixed weight pressing down on the debt the same weight every month, while the balance shrinks helplessly underneath it. The lender wants your payment to fade. You simply decline. Go back to that $6,700 card. On the shrinking minimum, it started around $185 a month and dragged out almost 19 years. Now keep paying that very same $185 every month and refuse to let it fall as the balance drops. It is the same card and the same payment coming out of the same paycheck. Nothing about your budget has changed. You are debt-free in under 5 years instead of 19, and you save more than $6,000 in interest along the way. Nothing about what you could afford changed. All you did was refuse to let the payment shrink. And if you can push that fixed payment up to $300 a month, the same balance is gone in a little over 2 years. The single act of freezing the number does most of the heavy lifting before you find a single extra dollar. Why does something so small bend the timeline so far? Because of what a dollar of principal actually buys you. When you put one extra dollar toward the balance instead of the interest, you do not just erase that $1. You erase every future month of interest that dollar would ever have generated for the rest of the loan's life. On a card at 21%, $100 you refuse to carry would have cost you about $160 in interest over 5 years. So that $100 is not worth $100 to you. It is worth $260. Every dollar of principal you kill today is a dollar that can never charge you rent again. That is the engine underneath the rule, and for the first time it runs in your direction instead of the bank's. Before you go scorched earth on every balance you own, though, there is an order of operations worth getting right, because one wrong move quietly undoes the whole plan. Keep a small cash buffer alive first. Not the full 3 to 6 month emergency fund you have heard about. Just a starter cushion, something like $1,000, sitting in a separate account you do not touch. Here is the reason. If you fling every spare dollar at the debt and keep nothing in reserve, the next surprise, the transmission, the dental bill, the busted water heater, lands straight onto a credit card, and you are right back where you started with less hope than before. A small buffer is what keeps a bad week from becoming a brand new balance. Once that cushion exists, then the high interest debt becomes the clear priority over extra saving or even investing, and the math says why. A strong high-yield savings account pays around 4% right now, while the national average sits closer to 1/3 of 1%, and the giant banks pay almost nothing at all. Your credit card charges 21. Throwing money at a 21% debt is a guaranteed 21% return, tax-free, with zero risk, which is something no savings account and almost no investment on earth can promise you. So the sequence is simple. Tiny buffer first, then attack the expensive debt with everything. And one more piece of order matters here. If your job offers a retirement match, the free money from that match usually beats even a high-rate payoff, so capturing the full match first is worth it. Past that point, though, almost nothing outranks killing a 21% balance. People agonize over whether to invest while they carry card debt, chasing a market that might return 7% in a good year while they bleed 21% on the cards. The cards win that argument every time. Clear the expensive debt, and then the investing you do afterward gets to compound on top of a foundation that is no longer cracked. And that word, expensive, points to the next layer of the rule, the part the screen never tells you. The order you attack your debts in matters enormously. If you owe on more than one thing, a card here, a car loan there, maybe a personal loan on top, you do not spread your extra money evenly across all of them like peanut butter on toast. You make the minimum on every debt to keep them all current, and then you take every spare dollar and aim it like a spotlight at the single debt with the highest interest rate. Not the biggest balance, the highest rate. That is the debt charging you the most rent for every dollar you owe it, so killing it first stops the most bleeding the fastest. The finance world calls this the avalanche method, and on pure mathematics, nothing beats it for total dollars saved. Here is why the rate beats the balance. In the simplest terms, imagine you have an extra $200 this month and two debts to choose between. One is a $5,000 card at 22%. The other is a $15,000 car loan at 6%. Your instinct screams to attack the big scary $15,000, but that car loan only charges you about 6 cents a year for every dollar you owe it, while the card charges 22. Sending your $200 at the card kills nearly 4 times as much future interest as sending it at the car, even though the car balance is 3 times larger. The size of the debt is just how loud it feels. The rate is how much it actually costs you. Chase the cost, not the noise, and your money does the most damage to the lender instead of to you. Let me put real numbers on a real shaped situation, because that $48,000 on your screen almost never sits politely on one card. Imagine it spread the way it usually is in actual life. Around $6,500 on a credit card at 21%, $18,000 on a used car loan at a little over 11%, which is close to the genuine average for used cars in 2026, $13,500 on a personal loan near 12%, and $10,000 in student debt at roughly 6%. Add up the required minimums across all four, and you are looking at about $965 a month. Now pay only those minimums, but the instant any single debt hits zero, you take its old payment and pour it onto the next debt in line. That one move, rolling each freed up payment forward instead of pocketing it, clears the entire $48,000 in under 6 years on the minimums alone. Find just $250 extra a month on top of that, and you are completely done in a little over 4 years, having paid about $11,000 in interest rather than watching it balloon across decades. That rolling step is the part nearly everyone skips, and it is exactly where the speed comes from. When your credit card finally hits zero, the natural instinct is to exhale and reclaim that payment for your daily life. Skip the exhale. Take that entire payment and stack it onto the car loan on top of what you were already sending there every month. Now the car is being attacked by 2 payments at once. When the car dies, both of those roll together onto the personal loan. Your total monthly outlay never goes up by a cent. You committed to one number at the very beginning, and you simply keep that number pointed at whatever debt is still standing. The debts then fall faster and faster, like the last few dominoes after a slow and stubborn start, because every victory makes the next attack heavier than the one before. If this is clicking for you, take 1 second to subscribe before we go further. This channel breaks down the money mechanics nobody bothered to teach us, in plain language every single week, and the next few videos dig into exactly how to free up that extra couple $100 a month without feeling like you are living on rice and regret. Subscribe so the next one actually finds you. Now back to the rule, because there is an honest debate I owe you before you build your own plan. The avalanche, attacking the highest rate first, wins on math every time without exception. But it has a rival worth knowing about, and the research behind that rival is genuinely surprising. The snowball method tells you to ignore interest rates entirely and attack your smallest balance first, regardless of the rate, purely to get one whole debt gone as fast as humanly possible. On paper, that approach costs you a little more in interest. In the 4-debt example we just ran, the snowball lands almost exactly where the avalanche does, only a few $100s behind across 4 years. So why on earth would anyone choose the slightly worse math on purpose? Because behavioral researchers studying real people have found that those who knock out an entire debt early, who get that first clean, complete win, are noticeably more likely to stay with the plan and actually cross the finish line. And a method you finish will always beat a perfect method you abandon in month 3. So choose honestly, based on who you actually are. If you are driven by the numbers and you know you will not quit, run the avalanche and pay the least possible. If you have started and stalled before, if you need the feeling of progress more than you need optimization, take the smallest balance first and let the early win carry your momentum forward. The core of the rule, locking your payment and rolling it forward, works identically either way. The only thing that changes is which debt you point the spotlight at first. So that is the full spine of it. Lock the payment so it cannot shrink. Aim it at one debt at a time. Roll it forward the moment a debt dies. The very next question is always the same, which is where the extra money is supposed to come from. Because the entire difference between a 22-year payoff and a 9-year one usually lives inside a couple $100s a month. Let me show you how little it actually takes and where it tends to hide. Return to that $48,000 balance again at a realistic blended rate near 10% across all of it. Paying $450 a month, you are staring down more than 20 years and over $70,000 in interest, which means you would eventually pay back well past $100,000 in total. Now add just $200 a month and hold that new, slightly higher payment steady, never letting it slip. The payoff drops from 22 years to under 10, and the interest falls by roughly $44,000. $200 a month is the entire hinge the timeline swings on. Add a little more and it gets dramatic in a hurry. Bump the payment to $750 a month and the same debt is gone in under 8 years. Get it to $900 and you are free in under 6, having cut your lifetime interest by more than $50,000 compared to where you started. The amount of money is almost not the point. The refusal to let the payment shrink is the point. $200 extra a month sounds like a fortune until you slice it down to $5 a day. $5 a day is $150 a month and more than $1,800 a year, and most of us leak roughly that much without ever feeling it leave. So run a brutal, honest audit of 1 month of statements with an actual highlighter in your hand, the way almost everyone who escapes serious debt eventually does. The streaming services you quietly stacked one at a time and forgot. That subscription auto-renewing for the 11th straight month you never once opened. Delivery fees layered on top of service fees layered on top of tips. One honest pass through your statements usually surfaces a few $100s hiding in plain sight. Money already walking out of your account every month in exchange for nothing at all. This is not about cutting your life down to the bone or never enjoying anything again. It is about redirecting waste you could not even feel toward the one thing that is buying back your future. There is a second place to look for that money, and it costs you nothing but a slightly uncomfortable phone call. Your interest rate is not always carved in stone. People with a decent payment history call their card issuer and ask for a lower rate far more often than you would ever guess, and a meaningful share of them simply get one, sometimes several points lower, just for asking the question. A few points shaved off a 21% card on a real balance is hundreds of dollars a year that now flows to your principal instead of the bank's profits. And if your credit has improved since you opened the account, a balance transfer to a card with a 0% introductory window, which commonly runs 11 or 12 months, can pause the interest entirely so that every dollar you send lands directly on the balance. Just respect the trap folded inside that offer. The 0% always ends, and if you have not changed the behavior that built the debt in the first place, you will simply relapse onto a fresh card with a new balance. The transfer buys you time. It does not buy you a new set of habits. The rule is the thing that changes the ending. This is also the right moment to talk honestly about consolidation, because it gets sold as a cure and it is really just a tool. A consolidation or personal loan rolls several high-rate debts into one new loan, ideally at a lower rate, with one fixed monthly payment. When it genuinely lowers your interest rate and you keep the old paid-off cards in a drawer instead of running them back up, it can absolutely accelerate the rule, because more of your locked payment now attacks principal. But consolidation does nothing on its own. If you consolidate and then quietly rebuild a balance on the cards you just cleared, you have not reduced your debt. You have doubled your problem and given it a tidier-looking statement. Moving debt from one container to another feels like progress. It is not the same thing as killing it. Use consolidation only as a way to lower the rate underneath a rule you are already following, never as a substitute for the rule itself. Let me show you what all of this looks like on a real person. Because the math is one thing, and watching it actually work in a life is another. Think of someone like Hannah, 38 years old, earning a perfectly normal salary, who hit a wall almost identical to the one on your screen. She owed around $19,000 across 2 credit cards and a personal loan, and she was paying every minimum on time every month. Watching the totals refuse to move for 2 solid years. By every traditional measure, she was being responsible. She was also going absolutely nowhere, because responsible and effective turned out to be 2 completely different things. The first weekend, she sat down and did the highlighter audit and found $310 a month bleeding quietly out of forgotten subscriptions and a gym she had not walked into since spring. She did not invest that recovered money, and she did not pad a savings account with it either. Instead, she locked in a fixed payment, refused to let it shrink as the balances fell, and pointed the whole thing at her highest rate card first. When that card finally hit 0, she did not celebrate by reclaiming the payment for herself. She rolled the entire thing onto the personal loan, then onto the second card. The debt that had not budged in 2 years was gone in just under 3, and the only thing she truly added to her life was a flat refusal to let the bank set her pace. Or take someone like Desmond, who carried a single stubborn auto loan in a card and who had spent years convinced he simply did not earn enough to get ahead. His income never changed during his payoff. What changed was that he stopped paying the falling minimum, froze his payment at the highest level he could sustain, killed the 20-something% card first, and then rolled that freed payment straight onto the car. The car loan that was scheduled to outlive his patience was retired years early. Neither of these people won a lottery. Neither got a raise or an inheritance. They simply stopped letting their payments shrink and started rolling them forward. What derails people is almost never the math. It is a short, predictable list of quiet mistakes, and you should be able to see every one of them coming. The first is paying down old debt while cheerfully opening new debt right behind it, financing a couch or the latest phone while you are supposedly bailing out the boat. Every new balance is a new track lengthening under your feet, and the rule cannot outrun a hole you keep digging on purpose. The second is draining your entire cash cushion to throw at the debt in one dramatic, heroic gesture, because the very next surprise expense lands right back on a card and resets you to 0 with your morale in pieces. The third is mistaking motion for progress, endlessly refinancing and transferring and consolidating while the spending underneath it never actually changes. Shuffling debt between accounts can feel productive for an afternoon. It is not the same as paying it off. And the fourth, the one that quietly costs the most, is quitting the instant a single debt disappears. Pocketing that newly freed payment for your lifestyle instead of rolling it forward, which is the exact moment the real acceleration was finally supposed to begin. There is one more thing, Almost nobody tells you about reaching zero, and it is the deepest reason this whole grind is worth it. The money is only half of the reward. When the timeline on that screen finally starts collapsing instead of crawling, something shifts in how you make every other decision in your life. You stop choosing jobs out of pure fear. Negotiations happen from a different place entirely once walking away is actually survivable. And you finally sleep without the low electric hum of a number you are losing to every night while you lie there. A person carrying a decade of debt makes 1,000 small, frightened choices without even noticing, each one reasonable on its own, all of them silently shrinking the life they could have built. Buying back your monthly cash flow is really buying back your nerve, and that compounds in directions no spreadsheet on earth can capture. If you want one concrete place to start tonight, it is this. Pull up every balance you owe and write each one down beside its interest rate, in order from highest rate to lowest. Decide on a single monthly payment number you can hold steady through good months and bad, even if it is barely above your current minimums to begin with. Make the minimum on everything. Send every spare dollar at the top of that list, and the moment the top debt is gone, slide that whole payment down to the next line without keeping a dollar of it. That is the entire rule written on a single sheet of paper. You do not need software or a guru or a perfect month. You need a list, a locked number, and the stubbornness to keep rolling it forward. So look at that screen one more time, the one that said 10 years and made your stomach drop through the floor. That number was never really the truth. It was the lender's preferred version of the truth, built on a payment engineered to shrink and an interest rate working against you quietly in the dark. The honest version is that the timeline was never fixed at all. You set it. You set it the moment you decide to lock your payment, aim it at the right debt, and roll it relentlessly forward until the very last one falls. There is one last thing worth naming before you go, because it sits underneath everything we just covered. The rule speeds up the climb out, but the deeper truth is that most people never had to be down here in the first place. The debt is usually a symptom, not the origin. And the origin is the part of money education that almost none of us were ever actually taught. How interest truly works. Why the minimum is a trap dressed up as mercy. How to build the small buffer that keeps one bad month from spiraling into a brand new balance. If any of this was the first time someone laid the mechanics out for you in plain words, then that gap behind the gap is exactly what my video on financial literacy is built to close. It is the real beginning of any money journey, the foundation that keeps you from ever landing back in front of that 10-year screen again. Whenever you are ready for it, that is where the road actually starts.